Most of us have to say, boy, we've been using stuff up a lot faster than we should have.
Generations and people are waking up and saying that enough is enough.
It's really important to join the fire that youth bring into society with the wisdom that elders bring.
It doesn't actually matter your age right now. This is the last moment we have to turn it around.
A society grows great when its elders plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in. Oh, high five.
There you go.
Production of immense possibilities is made possible by the generous support of the Earth and Humanity Foundation, Wendy Selden, Rogue Co-ops, a community-centered collaboration among the Ashland Food Co-op, the Grange Co-op, Rogue Credit Union, and the Medford Food Co-op, Cliff Bar and Company, Elizabeth York, and these additional members of the Immense Possibilities Community Builders Circle.
Welcome to our weekly visit with people who are creating immense possibilities for healthy communities, solutions to all kinds of challenges. We like to think of ourselves as a nation that always leaves the next generation a better and more promising world than the one we inherited. But is that true? Many people don't think so. The young leaders like the ones we'll meet tonight are looking at the future with clear and realistic eyes.
Our generation has the unique distinction of living at a moment at the crossroads, where the gifts of the last 250 years has given us tremendous access. The internet, my iPhone, the ability to be all over the world. And at the same time, the costs of those things are catching up with us and are catching up with our generation a lot more than with our parents' generation.
This generation has been gathering allies, people older than them who believe that the costs that young man's talking about come in part from the very comfortable way of life we've enjoyed since before he was born, with consequences that he and his peers will have to deal with long after we're gone. So people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s are beginning to come together to do something about that.
The whole idea behind this program is that so many of us want to live a legacy. We want to make a positive contribution to our communities. And there's nothing more motivating than leading a project of our own design. And with all the challenges facing the next generation, there's a real need to engage people in innovative thinking and bringing a lot of the talent that we have in this community to bear. There are those who have a really clear idea of what they want to accomplish. Then there are others who they know they want to leverage their experience to make a meaningful contribution to their community, but they don't know what their contribution will be. But it's hard to get going. You don't know what's possible, who will join you, or whether you're going to have any fun. I think the true value of this program is the chance to lead a project with the support of like-minded people who all want to leave the world better than they found it.
That is Steve Higgs, Executive Director of the Portland-based SAGE, Senior Advocates for Generational Equity. Steve joins me now along with Ward Green, who founded the organization in 2011. Steve and Ward, welcome to Immense Possibilities. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you for having us, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
What led you specifically, Ward, to found this organization some years back?
Well, I will tell you almost with a laugh. I woke up one morning having missed the alarm clock, and I was nervous and I was excited about being late for a meeting of SAGE. And I was racing to get dressed. And then I realized there was no SAGE. The whole thing was a dream. The name SAGE, Senior Advocates for Generational Equity, that was part of the dream. And I said to my wife, wow, you won't believe this, told her the story. And she said, you know, Ward, I just read a proverb. I want to read to you. And she went and got her son literary magazine and read, I'm looking at the back of my card, a society grows great when its elders plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in.
Steve, we hear you say that most people do want to give back. They're not sure where and how to start. And we really share that belief here on Immense Possibilities, that that's the real obstacle. So give us an idea specifically about how someone can go to one of your workshops and walk away with some practical tips and plans on starting.
To begin with, there is this challenge that people deal with in their lives where they have identified something that's a value that they hold. Maybe they want to recycle more, maybe they want to drive less. Whatever it happens to be, they might want to give more to a cause. But there's a gap between the actual feeling in their heart of what they want to do and what they actually do on the ground. And it turns out that if you give yourself a challenge, for example, for a couple of weeks, and you do something with your friends, you're more inclined to actually follow through on that challenge.
Because you feel accountable to the friends you've told about?
Yes, you feel accountable, and it's fun. You know, it's fun doing something together with friends. The other thing that we concentrate on is identifying your role. First, you know, finding your passion. It's an opportunity for people to think about what really was an opportunity that was important to me that I think might be at risk. And that's a hook to actually have people connect.
What would be an example of that? What have you heard?
Well, a lot of people do. They reflect on the fact that they've had, perhaps education is one of the first things that comes to people's minds, particularly people who have gone on to higher education in college.
You know, the student loan debt. We get people talking about the $1.2 trillion of student loan debt. And people, our experience is they leave thinking, wow, we had it good, and we really need to think about how we can allow the future generation to have the same kind of opportunity.
Do you think a lot of people sort of had that gestating for themselves, who were kind of waiting for a collective movement to encourage them?
I have no doubt that when people heard the concept of generational equity and the idea of giving forward, what they were saying was, this is exactly what I've been stewing about.
You know, it would be easy for a sense of guilt to find its way in here. We took more than our share and are leaving less than the share that they need.
I feel a sense of guilt because I've been more lucky and more blessed than I ever imagined. And I think back to JFK and his exhortation to ask not what your country can do for you, what can you do for your country? And when I was younger, we really believed that. And then somehow I forgot it along the way. So I think for me, there was a sense of guilt. We try not to talk about guilt. We try to talk about gratitude and about a sense of generosity. But I think underlying that, most of us have to say, boy, we've been using stuff up a lot faster than we should have.
The feeling might be there whether we put a name to it or not.
My horizon will probably reach me before the problems are solved, and that's okay. But I want to be able to say, I gave a legacy, you know, I gave forward, and I tried my best to help people think about the future generations.
You planted some trees, the shade in which you knew you never sit.
Precisely.
And the opportunity to do great work, whether it's in the environment, on economic security, or in education, there are vast needs.
No limits.
And our role as an organization is to help people find their place on that front and to dig in for the long haul, knowing that other people are doing the same. And I think then together, you can really change the course of society.
Steve Higgs is Executive Director of SAGE, Senior Advocates for Generational Equity, based in Portland. Steve, thank you very much for coming and joining us on Immense Possibilities.
Thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate it. Ward, will you stick around for just a little bit? I have one more conversation, someone I'd like you to meet for just a moment.
That'd be great.
Joining Ward Green and me now is Camila Thorndike, who visited with us some time back on her work with Oregon Climate and generational collaboration. Camila, welcome. It's great to have you back.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
What comes to your mind when you hear this conversation about generational equity?
Well, it's very refreshing and much needed. I would agree. It's past due. I have two thoughts. One, yes, this is a moment in which it's very obvious that one generation or many generations in the past have benefited greatly from a system of accumulation of wealth and resources, and that's been at the cost of the future. And my generation, millennials, whatever you'd like to call us, I think we're really on the cusp of beginning to feel those impacts and realizing that our children, if we choose to have them, will bear the full brunt.
How much anger do you hear in your generation about getting the short end of the stick generationally? Is that out there, and does it need addressing? The
anger is boiling under the surface, I believe. It has, of course, the other side in which we can incinerate ourselves with anger. I think for our generation, my generation in particular, what's more overwhelming is cynicism, is that we really don't see how these crises that we're facing, economic, environmental, social, cultural, they're so immense, and we see so little leadership from the elders that are in power right now. And the timelines of those crises are so pressing that we're left wondering if it's worth engaging at all.
What is effective in dealing with that cynicism?
There's nothing more effective than a solution that makes sense. And that's why we founded this organization, Oregon Climate, to propose a solution to the climate crisis that's fair and effective and that we can implement here in Oregon. And we've seen from that leading with a solution that people can parse out from any angle, that's unlocked tens of thousands of volunteer hours from my generation and a real emergence of hope grounded in the stark reality of what we're facing. It's so inspirational to work with every day.
What has it unleashed from older generations?
A real mix. On the one hand, I think we've seen people who've been waiting for young people to step up, elated and investing with an overwhelming sense of generosity. I think that perhaps there's an element of luxury for both ends of the generational spectrum, such that the oldest are in retirement and don't need to often provide for those daily needs. And when you're freed from that immediate economic pressure and you're not worried about losing your job tomorrow, you can answer to a moral call in a different way. My generation, we don't have kids yet, many of us, and yes, we have been sacrificing. I mean, unpaid internships or volunteer hours and saddled with, as Warren pointed out, trillions of dollars of debt.
You get told it's good for your resume.
Right, good for our resume, exactly. But it's true that I can take risks that the generations between us can't. And that's why I think our partnership is so important right now.
I think we need to coordinate our efforts in a way. And I think we also need to make our representatives more accountable. And I hope young people will vote. I know that they talk. It worries me at times that voter turnout is low. And I think we need to work together to make change happen. But there's a movement afoot.
I've often been lobbed the rhetorical question, why aren't young people out in the streets when XYZ crisis is happening? And I think if we can put ourselves in each other's shoes for a moment and look at just what enormous pressure my generation is under, let's just start financially. I mean, the cost of college is 994% what it was in 1970. The cost of housing has doubled. I came to political consciousness, my generation, about 13, I think, when Bush stole the election. And where were more baby boomers out in the street protesting?
So your answer to why aren't more kids out in the street is why isn't more everybody out in the street?
Why isn't more everybody out in the street? And why was it not happening at the time when we could have prevented these crises? I was born 1987, the year that James Hansen testified to Congress about climate change. My entire lifetime has gone by, the vast majority of which I could not vote. And we've had clear knowledge of this crisis, which is the shortest burning fuse of them all. And where have the older generations been? Why is the critique lobbed at us that we're not out in the street? We're cynical because we look at what's happening and we wonder what time we have left. And so that's why I would turn it back on them and say, well, help us, donate. That allows for people not to be living at home with their parents volunteering to do this work and have a sense of dignity in it, to feel that this is one human moment, this is one collective generation. It doesn't actually matter your age right now. This is the last moment we have to turn it around.
I think we really need to give forward. We talked about time, talent, money. We need to do that. And if we don't, I think future generations will look back at our generation and will say, gosh, what were they thinking? Were they thinking that the problem would solve itself?
The point keeps coming out that the help that our generation has wanted to offer has come with a sense of, we know the best way to do it and you don't, so let us tell you how to do this. And for some peculiar reason, that doesn't land very effectively. Do you think that people in SAGE are ready to do a deep self-examination if they really are willing to crack open some of their beliefs, with the possibility that younger people are really seeing important things that we're not?
One of the things we have promised ourselves at SAGE is no topic is off limits. And so if young people say, we really want to focus on carbon tax, frankly, what a great time to talk about gasoline tax with gasoline prices so low.
Do you think the climate change issue has had value in galvanizing the sense of generational equity among some people? Wasn't there before?
I think it has. I think it's beginning to, but I do recognize that we've got a ways to go to make people realize, as Camila says, the urgency. I don't know how short the fuse is, but it's getting shorter.
Both of you think much more than other people do about generational issues and generational connection. What do you want to be sure the other remembers going forward?
I think a lot about guilt, as was mentioned earlier, and I don't think it's not a productive emotion. I think it's almost trite to say, but love is the most productive of all emotions, and we need to work hard right now, and we need to stick together through very, very, very difficult times. And if we can keep the love for our kids or grandkids or favorite place or memories of the past at the center of our work, then we will continue to give and have an attitude of giving instead of expectation and of aggrandizement and of credit.
I'm deeply committed to living the rest of my life trying to make the change happen, recognizing it may take longer than my life, and I'm okay with that. But I really hope young people will take heart knowing that more and more of us really are committed to the moral obligation that we've talked about.
Ward Green is the founder of SAGE, Senior Advocates for Generational Equity. Camila Thorndike is founder and head of Oregon Climate. You two are doing wonderful work, and it's sort of exciting to see you start to do it together. Thank you very much for joining us on Immense Possibilities.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Jeff.
High five.
Oh, high five.
Our generation is facing some of the greatest challenges in human history. But what if a new future is truly possible? What if we could use the energy and passion of our generation to lead humanity into a new chapter in history? Generation Waking Up is a nonprofit organization unleashing the collaborative power of our generation. We awaken, empower, and mobilize young people to use their talents and passions in service of a better future.
The founder of the dynamic national group Generation Waking Up is Joshua Gorman, and he joins me now from Oakland, California. Joshua, welcome to Immense Possibilities.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Great to be on the show today.
I'm curious, first of all, if you run into a lot of young people who are angry at the older generation for the kind of world that they're inheriting.
Yes, yeah. Today's young people are often furious with their elders and with their parents. And yet, I think there's a lot of young people, too, who get it's a lot more complex. I think what I encounter most, though, is a disconnect between today's young people and olders and elders in our world today. So many young people don't spend time with and have no connection with older generations.
Do you think the generation that's been in power, say the boomer generation, really has a generational obligation to younger people because of the state of the world right now?
Well, I think every generation has an obligation to each other because of the state of our world. You know, for me, this is a time of all hands on deck. And I really believe that the change our world is calling for can only come through multiple generations, everyone alive today collaborating together. But there is something unique about boomers who are still in a position of power. And the boomer generation, all signs are that they're going to live long and healthy lives. So there's decades still to come of boomer influence in the world. And yet millennials are coming of age on the world stage to really step into leadership. And so it's a prime opportunity for generational collaboration. And so boomers have pioneered so much change. And yet I think it's true that a lot of boomers have taken advantage of the abundance in their lives, and they've made our problems worse. And so in the areas that we still need to correct, you know, boomers need to step up and join forces with millennials.
So if there's a core message or request that you want to convey to boomers, what would it be?
Increasingly, I realize that young people and old people just have such a hard time relating to each other. And there's a lot of assumptions about each other that oftentimes aren't true. And I actually think that young people have a lot to teach and to share with boomers, because the world is changing so much. And millennials are actually oftentimes the early adopters of these innovations in society. So I also think there's a huge learning experience for boomers when they actually do slow down and connect with millennials.
Do you have older people coming to you at Generation Waking Up and saying, we really like what you're doing, how can we help? And if so, what do you tell them? For the most part, we invite them to come to our programs and be mentors. So we offer, in the workshops that we host, the wake ups or our leadership trainings. It's tricky too, though. I have a lot of boomers who come and want to help, but they want to help in their way, and they often don't get the reality that we're facing, or even the culture of today's young people. And so there can be kind of a cultural conflict. Young people really do have a unique leadership role. There's something about the cycle of the stages of life. And so young people, with all of our fresh energy and ideas and idealism, that's a powerful force. And I actually believe it's a very purposeful force. And as a society, I think we really need to consciously welcome in that regenerative power that young people bring. And yet it's oftentimes untempered, and it's very extreme. It's really important to join the fire that youth bring into society with the wisdom that elders bring. We need to be igniting young people and young leaders, but we need to be connecting that up with olders and elders, and not just organizing in silos of young people over here and the olders and elders over there. Is there anything else you'd like to say to someone who's just starting to ponder this notion of generational equity?
In the long sweep of history, this is just one short moment here in the 21st century. And so, boomers and millennials, we're occupying really the same time in history. But I think together we can look at, what about generations that, if life is fortunate to go on in the 22nd century, what are their lives going to be like? What can we do together today? And so I'm excited about that. I'm committed to exploring what's possible there.
Joshua Gorman is the founder and head of Generation Waking Up. Joshua, thanks for your work, and thanks for telling us about it here today.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you for immense possibilities.
For IP Filmworks this week, we want you to see some of what Joshua Gorman's Generation Waking Up has to offer.
Throughout time, generation after generation has risen up and made their mark on the world. Each has faced great challenges, and each has been a part of writing a new chapter in the human story.
In the last 100 years, we have consumed more natural resources than in human history up to that point combined.
What do you think? If we keep drilling for oil everywhere and blowing up everything for coal and poisoning the water supply, this earth will not sustain us, the human race, life, for much longer.
We are forgetting that we depend on the land for everything, and in that forgetting are destroying a lot more, a lot faster.
Everything's trying to get sold now to youth, and that doesn't really allow them to find inner happiness, and it's just trying to use objects to make them feel good or okay, or some kind of pleasure that doesn't last very long.
I see all my peers getting caught in many distractions, and we've reached a point, I feel like, in our history that we don't have time for that anymore.
You mess with things that we love, like our earth and our people, it activates us.
Generations and people are waking up and saying that enough is enough.
And we can connect to youth that are all over the planet. So we are also a generation who has the ability to be a global generation. really for the first time.
Movements that could have taken a generation to come to a head, you know, are like happening in a week now.
There's thousands, millions of movements around the world of people who are sensing that there's something wrong and are now starting to build the movements together.
What we're talking about is really a global shift in the way we think about everything we do. We have all the technology and resources to do this. All it's going to take is people realizing that we need to do it now.
We are writing a different story than the one we've been led to believe is inevitable.
We have that spark, that ignition to just like, no matter what's thrown up in our way, we're gonna get back up and we're just gonna keep on going. And that is the story of our generation.
And that's it for this edition of Immense Possibilities. You can find out information about the show or send us suggestions at immensepossibilities.org or visit our Facebook page and like and share us there. Thanks much for watching. I'm Jeff Golden. Until next time, please do what you can do. Thanks for watching to learn about tonight's immense possibility. You can watch any of our past programs anytime at immensepossibilities.org.
The SLU House experience is really an opportunity for students to get out of the classroom and engage the community in solving real-world problems.
Houses are about a spirit of adventure. Maybe that's rafting or building a house, but it's also about the adventure of figuring out what comes next.
Get involved, make a difference in the world.
Get connected, join a house.